Greetings and welcome to today's webinar, A Future-Proof Strategy for Cloud Adoption, featuring Cal Poly and sponsored by Amazon Web Services. Hi, this is Casey Green. I'm the digital tweet blogger at Inside Higher Ed, and I run the Campus Computing Project. I'm pleased to welcome Dustin DeBrum, Manager of Enterprise Applications at Cal Poly, and Paul Jurasin, Director of New Programs at Cal Poly, who are going to talk with us about moving to the cloud at Cal Poly. Before we begin, just a little bit of a housekeeping. We're using On24 for today's webinar, so please enter your questions in the Q&A window. We're going to monitor those during the presentations. We know that many of you will want to know about getting the slides for this presentation. Within 24 hours, you'll get a follow-up email if you're participating or if you've registered, which will take you to the audio archive, the presentation, plus a white paper that's been prepared specifically for this session. Again, I want to welcome you all, and with this, I want to turn the presentation over to Dustin DeBrum from Cal Poly. Dustin, the program and the presentation are yours.
Thank you, Casey. Hope everyone's doing well today. As Casey mentioned, my name is Dustin DeBrum. I'm the manager for Enterprise Applications here at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. I wanted to start off by just providing a little bit of a background for those of you who are unfamiliar with our campus. Cal Poly is located about halfway in between Los Angeles and San Francisco on California's Central Coast. We were founded in 1901, and we're a polytechnic university that primarily focuses on a learn-by-doing model for all of our students. With some interesting tidbits of information to add into that, in 2006, we actually brought in a total of around 5,000 first-time freshmen and transfer students. Out of that, those individuals actually came out of about 58,000 applicants. So we're pretty popular, we believe, on the stage out there. So that gives a little background on Cal Poly. Let's try to actually dive right into the conversation for today. Migrating to the cloud is actually a huge impact for my department, Enterprise Applications. But on a broader scale, cloud is still a maturing technology across the infrastructures that we have. And it's playing a more crucial role on a daily operational basis. Even if you don't have a cloud strategy in place right now, you're using cloud tools. How many of your vendors are out there are actually cloud-based, possibly? So let's try to actually look at starting with a baseline of information to get going on what cloud actually is. In 2011 and in 2013, the National Institute of Standard Technology, NIST, actually put out two different documents. One was the updated document of a roadmap identifying what cloud is. And I want to actually quote this. Cloud is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. This is a good start, but it's a little generalized. What it's really missing is a universal deployment strategy. Cloud really came onto the scene in 2006 with the launch of AWS. And throughout that 11 years so far, how many times have you been asked to explain what is the cloud? How do you explain that in a way that it matches what everybody else thinks? Do organizations see the cloud in the same light? What's really missing here is a lack of clarity. This lack of clarity leads to oversimplification, some generalization of cloud claims. The lack of no universal agreed strategic model on how to cloud can actually create competing business models. So what Cal Poly has tried to do is break through that confusion by creating and defining two core definitions about cloud technology. We define these as standardization and acceleration. So why these words? What do you think of when you hear them? Standardization implies some regimentation. It's not flexible. It implies carbon copies. Whereas acceleration implies movement and agility. Let's look at both of these. Standardization is really rooted in an old data center model. Operational expense savings are gained from standard configurations and commonality. Servers are all the same. Everyone's on the same platforms or the same stacks. Great example is all your servers in a room, everyone running on the same database. So we're identifying applications and services that are defined by only one particular type of data application. Acceleration, on the other hand, is based on a lean approach. It focuses on a self-service model, really looking at providing customers with space, not specifications. Rather than a box, you get a space that you can create in. And that space is bounded off by guardrails of policy and security. This allows creativity, but with constraints already in place to ensure that policies for the campus and your business needs are already met. The cool thing about this is it provides flexibility for development in your infrastructure. Operational expense savings are achieved by combining variable expense and flexibility to build resources that more precisely meet customer needs. Each of these actually has their positives and negatives. But Cal Poly has chosen the acceleration model. What that means is we're not looking at doing a lift and shift type situation. We are applying, where we see issues with a lot of folks is applying the old data center ideas to the cloud misses the critical benefits of cloud technology and what it can bring to the table. What we really need to focus on is defining flexibility, scalability, and reliability. These are the core benefits that we can get out of a cloud migration. Organizations are trying to shoehorn old technology ideas and old technology blueprints into the cloud. This is a standardized view. Cloud does not follow these trends of the past. Therefore, it's only logical that we need new approaches. And not just in technology. We also need to reframe how we think on a business side of things. IT is always in a state of change. We've seen that happen from miniaturization and virtualization leading to cloud technology. And now we see it as cloud leads to infrastructure, platform, and software as service models. Of course, all of these cost dollars. And changing the security requirements on top of this adds additional impacts. The bottom line is that costs are continuing to rise. Financial teams, therefore, are going to want to try to model this. They're going to want to apply old modeling methods. Will that help find the savings and benefits for the future? Cloud also requires a change in thought about how we look at real cost benefits. Total cost of operation is a great starting point, and it's recommended by most vendors that are out there. This is a very important way to get going. But it misses the less tangible gains cloud can provide. We call this, here at Cal Poly, the total operational benefit. Both standardization and acceleration share benefits across the board. But by adding the acceleration piece, we really are seeing additional growth here. We're seeing the ability to add creativity, innovation, reallocation, education, growth, flexibility, and experimentation to the mix. With that, we get the flexibility of the acceleration model. These bring real long-term benefits to the table. That flexibility means flexible growth. And here's a great example for us locally. Cal Poly's current data center is built in 1963. It spans about 3,000 square feet, and it supports more than 900 virtual machines stretched across with 78 racks. This in turn supports about 25,000 customers daily. It can all be gone in one flush, since it actually sits directly below a leaking restroom. Replacing all of this came in with an estimate of about $8 to $10 million. And that's before you really think about the future-proofing required to include additional growth. We love showing these photos. And yes, this is a garden hose in our data center. So What's the approach Cal Poly is taking to solve all of this? Cal Poly is going all in to the cloud. That's a big statement. And what does it really mean? Well, it means we are moving all of our infrastructure into an AWS environment. Cal Poly's applications, platforms, and services will also move. Our learning management system, our data and content management tools, our mobile applications, our scheduling tools, all of these are going to be migrating. Essentially, everything that's not tied down will move into the cloud. What will remain is approximately 20% of our on-campus tools and hardware required to maintain our infrastructures. Remember, this is not a lift and shift way to go. We're actually taking our time. In fact, we're actually looking at approximately a 3-year process to make this migration. Using the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, or CAF model, as a basis is going to help us to get there. This includes identifying discovery steps, people requirements, costs, governance, architecture, and assessments of our resources. Other organizations have done lift and shift models, and they end up having to come back because they didn't build in the change strategy to really move forward in a cloud direction. Also, we're adopting a cloud-first philosophy for all of our new services. What does that really mean? Working with our partners, we're evaluating the current and future state of our applications. We're learning as we're going. We're documenting that process as well. We're changing how we work. AWS provides us not just a platform, but it provides us a suite of services. By using the full power of these tools, we can actually grow our systems to be more sufficient. This means not just looking at EC2 servers or S3 storage buckets, but implementing Lambda tools to deploy infrastructure automatically. Or one of my favorite things down the road is deploying workspaces for students. Imagine your students coming onto campus already provisioned with a desktop that has all the tools and resources ready for them as soon as they get here. We want to change how we provide services by harnessing all of these new tools and features in support of our move to a DevOps model. Like I said before, it's not all about technology. At the core of our transformational change is the people, process, and the services that we provide. Focusing on change management is critical for us to reach success on this. And this means not just managing down by supporting staff within our teams, but also managing up, ensuring the executives on our campus actually understand what we're trying to accomplish and what is needed to get there. Total buy-in across the university is required to really make this a successful migration. This is what we mean by an all-in strategy. Change means people must have an understanding of what's coming down the road for them. We're trying to train everybody. Even training our customers on this campus is important for us. Before we move a single application to the cloud, we want to make sure that everyone has a good, solid foundation on what is going to be accomplished. Using the AWS Partner Network and Educate resources, we're helping to actually make that transition. Since we kicked off earlier this year, we now have 11 solutions architects, 1 developer, and 1 certified SysOps engineer, with a few more getting their actual certifications this month at the Amazon reInvent conference in Vegas. This is what we mean by an all-in strategy. Processes does not always apply to system diagrams. Defining how a process interacts with the people, not just the systems, is just as important. This is an example of an influence diagram that we utilize here on our campus. What's unique about these influence diagrams is that they identify not how a system interacts with the other systems, but how the individuals, the teams across the campus interact with each other. This helps us to identify how we need to communicate and work with groups in order to help make successful transitions from on-premise to cloud-based strategies for our services. This is what we mean by all in. On the service side, we're identifying and mapping services to AWS tools. Our learning management system is going to reap huge rewards as a great example by actually identifying what tools and services are going to help us to make the system perform better and function more successfully for our faculty and our students on campus. Additionally, this includes identifying other best-of-breed solutions that can actually fit into our service matrix. So we're not talking about a one-size-fit or a one-product fit for everything across the board. This is what we mean by all in. This process really plays into the learn-by-doing philosophy of Cal Poly. Cal Poly President Jeff Armstrong recently said, Cal Poly's motto is learn by doing. And as an institution focused on technology, what better way to embody that than by transforming our own IT infrastructure and going all in with the world's leading provider, AWS. And that's exactly what this is, a transformational change. Supporting that transformation is at the heart of the partnership with AWS. The Digital Transformation Hub, which Paul will speak about shortly, will allow us to share what we've learned as we go along the way. This means that even our own migration can be utilized as a template, which can help other universities via our Digital Transformation Hub. The collaborations that we then receive out of the DT Hub will continue to help us grow as a university as well. As we discussed, cloud lacks a universal deployment strategy, but building on an acceleration model is a starting point. This focuses on maintaining flexibility, scalability, and reliability. We must remove rigid structures and create open models in order to achieve success. This includes implementation of guardrails of policy and process around those open spaces we want to develop, and give our teams the ability to be creative within them. Doing this will allow IT to better support customers' changing needs into the future and help Cal Poly find success in our cloud migration. Thank you.
Great, Dustin, thanks very much. I want to remind our audience that we're recording the webinar and that if you have registered, whether you're with us today or you've got colleagues who were not able to join us, you'll get a follow-up email which will provide access to the archive, to the slides, and to a white paper. Dustin, before we go forward, a couple of questions. You've emphasized in your comments for the last couple of minutes that Cal Poly has taken an all-in strategy. That's a little different than a number of other institutions as they've thought about cloud. In some cases, there may be multiple technology providers who may say, we've got a cloud for this application, we've got a cloud, another would say, we've got a cloud for that application. Cal Poly seems to be saying, we don't care what the application is and who the provider might be, whether it's something large and complex, like something as part of an administrative system, or something smaller that might have to do with student workstations or particular or very specific applications important to researchers or to students. You're putting it all into the Amazon Web Services. Talk a little bit about the decision to go all in with one cloud provider, if you would, please.
I think that the important piece here that I tried to get across is we're utilizing Amazon as our infrastructure base. But as we noted, we also want to look for best-of-breed solutions that are out there for other tools or services that we might be able to plug in. So it's not necessarily meaning that other services, other SaaS solutions, or other platform solutions we might be able to utilize or integrate with aren't going to be available to us. We're not using Amazon for 100% of all of those tools and services because sometimes we're maybe beholden to applications that are part of a group purchase or part of a broader spec for our university system. So I think we're looking at a lot of variability of what we can accomplish within that space. But the all-in statement really means that focusing on that people, process, and services model is focusing on identifying tools and services that fit within a cloud context that are going to be beneficial to us as a university going into the future. really evaluating applications. Can they be, as they come in, that we want to use? Can they be a SaaS solution? Can they be broken down into parts and pieces that could be hosted in some form or fashion, either within our cloud infrastructure or within some other function or tool that we might have? So really kind of looking at it from a cloud-first mentality is our all-in strategy there, and then using our AWS infrastructure as a solid base for building our success into the future.
Great, thank you. You also talked about reliability, agility, flexibility, the process, the people, other aspects of the strategy to migrate to the cloud. One of the things that many of us as civilians, and a large part of our audience today essentially are civilians, they may not be the folks who work closely with the technology, but we hear a lot about it, is that the cloud's supposed to help save a lot of money. And at the same time, you talked about you've brought in additional people to help with this migration. Is it a matter, in terms of the early experience at Cal Poly, that this is a matter of migrating costs from one bucket to another, or in fact, is the expectation is that over time there will be some and potentially significant savings in terms of some of the technology costs that you currently incur and expect to incur in the future?
I think cost savings is going to be one that we'll be looking at over a longer range of period of time. You know, it's like if we look too short-sighted, we might not see the long-term benefits that we're going to end up gaining here. What we're really focusing on here is, from that savings perspective or standard, is just trying to think about things a little bit differently in our approach. So we're really not looking at, and that's why I mentioned, not looking at just a TCO modeling, a total cost operation. Now, granted, as I said, that is a good first start. We've gone through a TCO. But you also have to look at that total operational benefit portion. And identifying those less tangible pieces are what's really going to help you to understand how am I actually gaining additional resources or additional benefit out of this. Some of those benefits may not be quantifiable in a dollars and cents model, but they're going to be beneficial in some form or fashion to your university as you move forward. That flexibility, scalability, and reliability can actually then turn into actual cost savings if you're able to identify better ways to accomplish your goals than what you're currently doing by using a cloud infrastructure.
That's true. In fact, there are a lot of campuses where this total cost of ownership as opposed to the benefit or the value of investment sort of get into a balancing act back and forth in terms of the planning and the strategy. It's important to consider both, and particularly the long-term consequences. That's very helpful. Let's turn to Paul Jurasin as we continue the conversation. Paul, the presentation is yours.
Thanks, Casey. Let's start with talking a little bit about who I am. I'm Paul Jurasin. I'm the Director of New Programs at Cal Poly. I'm also the Director of the Digital Transformation Hub, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. My background in general is that I've been here with Cal Poly for about 5 years. I came to Cal Poly as the Director of Enterprise Systems, which means I ran the operations for our data center and our network and some of the other areas on campus. So I have a background in that area. And over more of a long term, I've had a lot of experience with transforming more manual processes into disruptive digital sorts of processes at multiple organizations that I've worked with in the past. So let's talk a little bit about the Digital Transformation Hub. And first, I think we'll probably say, when we picked the name Digital Transformation Hub, that definitely made sure that no one can understand what it is that this organization does. So we should really talk a little bit about what the Digital Transformation Hub is and what digital transformation actually means. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about where we're going to go in my part of the conversation here, and I want to be a little bit informal in my discussions. You'll see slides going across on the screen, but don't pay too much attention to those. They're kind of background. But what I do want to cover in the next few minutes is, again, what is the Digital Transformation Hub? We'll talk about the goals and benefits of the Digital Transformation Hub and what we're trying to solve with this organization. Then we'll talk about how the Digital Transformation Hub is different than other organizations that might seem like they do the same kind of thing. We'll talk about how the hub works and the activities that go on within the Digital Transformation Hub, and who cares that we're doing this, right? We'll talk about that as well. So Amazon Web Services and Cal Poly have a strategic relationship. Dustin talked some about that with our campus migration to the cloud. But as kind of a secondary part of our relationship, we wanted to put together an organization that could address challenges from other educational organizations, from government, and from nonprofits. So what the Digital Transformation Hub is actually designed to do is to come up with solutions that those organizations have. And we understand that public sector organizations commonly don't have the financial or other resources to address innovative types of activities, even though they have plenty of problems that need to be addressed. Sometimes the funding is just not there. So what we want to do is be able to take the challenges that public organizations have and address those challenges with innovative methodologies. So one of the main things that we're looking at here is applied research for the most part. We're looking at real-world problems. We're going to apply subject matter expertise, whether that's Cal Poly faculty or Amazon Web Services personnel and techniques to address some of these problems. So what then the Digital Transformation Hub is more of a innovation accelerator than anything else. We're really looking at accelerating innovation in the public sector. A cloud innovation center is probably a better description of what we're looking at. We're looking at how the cloud can help organizations move forward in ways that they couldn't before. We're going to talk about what the advantages are of the cloud and how the Digital Innovation Hub, or Digital Innovation, see, I'm changing the name myself. The Digital Transformation Hub can address those issues. So one of the things we want to talk about is that the Digital Transformation Hub is not a place. Even though we have office space, it's really a capability. It's a capability of taking smart people, smart processes, and applying them to real-world problems. So, again, some of the goals we want to look at here are how can we leverage the cloud to do things that weren't viable to do before. A lot of the things were possible to do with technologies that are not the cloud in the past, but when the cloud as it advances, it becomes a tool that can be used in ways that couldn't be used before. We can lower costs in our innovation. We can experiment. We can provide agility. We can change things more quickly as technologies change. We know that technologies are changing on a very rapid basis, and to be able to address those with on-premise hardware is very difficult sometimes. But in the cloud, we can do that. We can make changes very quickly. And we can scale rapidly, right? So if we implement a solution and we need to scale it rapidly for different times of the year, for example, when students register for classes, we might need to scale our systems up quickly and then scale them back down after registration, for example. What we want to do is be able to identify how we can do that and what the most efficient methods are. So what we're really doing in this case is we're removing the friction to the operations of a campus. What we want to be able to do is have students' experiences be smooth. We don't want technology to get in the way. And it's that friction that sometimes causes frustration with students and people in general, right? So we're trying to remove some of that friction so things are smoother. There are technologies out there that are developed every day that things like artificial intelligence and IoT systems and serverless computing and all kinds of things like that. That's not really what the focus of the Digital Transformation Hub is. The focus of the Digital Transformation Hub is to improve experiences for the public and for students through digital means. So the challenges that come to the Digital Transformation Hub are not intended to be hard technology challenges. They're intended to be hard challenges in general. So to give you kind of a high-level overview, you can see the quote on the screen. The Cal Poly Digital Transformation Hub utilizes proven innovation methodologies for the development of technologically advanced solutions to real-world challenges. That's really the core of what we're trying to do here. As you can see on the diagram, we have a number of areas that we're looking at solving challenges for. They range from human trafficking to smart cities to agriculture, kinesiology, and that little red dot is the CSU cloud migration. And it's not necessarily the CSU cloud migration. It's cloud migrations for organizations overall. What we're trying to be able to do here is, and you might notice that most of those are not technology-oriented issues. Many of them, some are social, some are scientific, some are research-oriented. Those are really what we want to bring into the Digital Transformation Hub. And then we want to be able to apply new technologies to these problems to be able to solve them. So again, I talked a little bit about the benefits that we're trying to bring out here. We're bringing out the benefits of using the cloud to do things that we couldn't do before or couldn't do them very well. So what we really want to be able to do is again, apply technology to non-technical problems in many cases. I was talking to one of the professors the other day here at Cal Poly, and what we talked about was some research issues that he was having. And he said, I can't really use the Digital Transformation Hub for solving my problems because my subject matter experts and my researchers are in biology and chemistry and physics. They're not really technology people. And what I said to him is that's exactly what we need are the subject matter experts in those areas to solve problems that are not technological. We can get the resources from Amazon Web Services. We can get the resources from other places to get that technical ability, that cloud expertise involved. But we really need the expertise of the subject matter experts for where the problems really exist in things like telemedicine, for example, or human trafficking is another area that we're looking at. So some of the roles that we've defined for the Digital Transformation Hub are a challenge manager who kind of manages the problems that are brought to the Digital Transformation Hub and kind of helps us put together communities to solve the problems. We have a project manager, also called a delivery manager. We have technical solutions architects, and we have a program manager from the Cal Poly side as well, and that's me. We also have interns that are focused on working on specific areas. We have a tech writer. We have a person who's focused on human trafficking issues. And we also have many students who are interested in doing their senior projects based on challenges that come to the Digital Transformation Hub. One of the things we didn't talk about earlier is that all students at Cal Poly, before they graduate, need to do a senior project. So there's a big need for senior projects and a big knowledge base out there for working on some of these things. So let's talk a little bit about what a challenge is. So what a challenge is, really, is a problem that some public sector organization is having, whether that be government, education, nonprofit, that they really need to develop an innovative solution to. So they would bring their challenge to the Digital Transformation Hub. We would accept that challenge and send it through the innovation process that we put in place. And then the second question you see on the screen is how is the challenge processed? We're going to go through that in a little more detail here in a second. But there is a defined innovation process that takes place to address the challenges that come to the Digital Transformation Hub. And then how do we solve the challenges for the public sector? Again, as these challenges are brought through the system, we put together innovation communities, which are stakeholders that have some stake in solving a solution. For example, innovation community might include one of the examples that we use sometimes is for law enforcement. So if we're looking for a law enforcement solution to, say, store video data, car cam data, we might have an innovation community that would include a police officer, a detective, a district attorney, perhaps, and then some cloud experts who all would work together to come up with a solution. So, and again, here's the example I just used, right? And many of the challenges that come to the Digital Transformation Hub are framed in a way where it's a what if. What if I could do X, or what if I could do Y? In this case, what if all types of data collected for the California law enforcement community could be easily and securely accessed at low cost by the widest variety of devices and tools? So that would be a way we would start. And then we would work through understanding what that problem is and coming up with a solution that the customer would be happy with. That's why we need the customers on our innovation team to help understand how we work through some of these issues. So there are core questions that we start with when we work through any of the challenges in the Digital Transformation Hub. First question we look at is, who is the customer? We have to be able to identify who the customer is for the solution we're trying to develop. And then we look at what is the customer's problem or opportunity that we're looking at, right? We have to understand who the customer is and what his challenge is before we can move ahead. And understanding the challenge that the customer is having is sometimes more difficult than it might seem. We need to really identify what it is that we're trying to solve as we move forward. And even more important is sometimes there's more than one challenge that we're looking at. So as we bring the challenge through the Digital Innovation Hub, we need to understand what the most important challenge is. So we need to get the team together and work through what that most important challenge is. So then we need to look at how do we know what the customer's need is? Is there data behind it? Is there statistics? Are there research reports? What is it that we're looking at, and how do we know that that's the most important problem? And then, and probably the most important, is what does the customer experience look like? We need to have the actual customer working with us to identify what it is that we're really looking for in solving these problems. Once we do that, then we can work backward toward the solution that we're looking to do. Amazon has an innovation technique called the working backwards process that we intend to employ here, and they use it within Amazon and AWS themselves. So we know it's proven, we know it works, and we plan to use it here as well. So what we're going to talk about next is what the innovation flow actually looks like for some of these challenges. And the diagram I'm about to show you is pretty complex, and we won't go through it in a lot of detail. But I did want to show you what it looks like. So it's got 5 areas that we look at. We identify what the customer's interest is. We engage the customer in understanding what the problem really is. We look at framing the challenge so that it's not too big or too small, and we can get it through our process in 10 weeks. So one of the things that we looked at when we put this system together is that we're on a quarter system here at Cal Poly, and they're 10-week quarters. So as we work through these challenges and we're using subject matter experts who are faculty or students, we want to be able to solve the challenge within a 10-week period. So we could take, for example, a professor's time for that 10 weeks during a quarter so he could step back from his teaching load and work with us through a 10-week period. So with that in mind, that's how we define how big the challenge needs to be. So we want it to have significant impact, but we also don't want it to go on forever. So that's what we're doing as far as framing that challenge. And then in the define stage, we work on what that solution is going to look like. And we look at it from the customer's point of view. We identify what the customer really is looking for here. We do a prototype. And when we do the prototype, this is kind of an interesting thing that happens where we look at what a press release might look like if we were to write a press release that defines what we've defined for the solution to the problem. Then we do some visual prototypes, which are drawings, and come up with a solution. And then the realized value part is the implementation of the solution that's been defined in this process. The Digital Transformation Hub stops its processes before the realized value piece. The realized value section is where the customer takes that solution and implements it either through their own internal staff or through consultants or however they might want to do that. So there's the process. One of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is, what might a challenge look like that goes through the Digital Transformation Hub? And one of the things I was thinking about is that, I was I was telling some people here in the office that I was up in Michigan last week. I grew up in northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. It's a very remote place, a lot of wildlife going on up there. And I was thinking when I was there, I was like, wow, I wonder how a researcher might identify what the migration patterns are for animals that migrate through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So, and then I thought of how this might work in our challenge process. So, you know, as I said before, what we like to do is we do a what-if statement. So if you were a wildlife biologist, for example, you might say, what if I could take video with a trail cam across multiple locations in the Upper Peninsula and identify the animals that cross in front of that trail cam over a large period of time to compare how the migration patterns change as a result of climate change. So there's a what-if statement that might happen. So then what you do is you put an innovation community together that would have a wildlife biologist, a climate scientist. You might have some cloud expertise there. You might have a database expertise, and maybe some artificial intelligence. Because what you might be able to do in this case is you would identify what the real problem is and what the challenges that the wildlife biologists might be having. An example of what one of their big problems might be is that I don't have enough resources to identify the species fast enough. So what we might do here then is to do some research to understand that that was your biggest problem, and then do the working backwards process where we might come up with a solution that would be something like, well, if we employed artificial intelligence and we trained a model to automatically identify species that crossed in front of the trail cams, we could add that information to a database and do analytics on that over time in a more automated fashion and be able to do the research very quickly. So that's kind of an example of what you might do in a digital transformation hub process. So what I wanted to do here on the last slide is to give you an idea of some of the areas of interest that have come to the Digital Transformation Hub so far. So we've had several organizations that have come to the Digital Transformation Hub and said, you know, here, I have a challenge. I want you to help us take this through your process. I won't read all of these, but we have some interesting ideas here. There's missing children identification using facial recognition. That's an interesting thing. What we're really trying to do with our challenges is address, again, social, nutritional, all kinds of different impacts that can make the world a better place if we can solve these problems quickly and with more innovation, more innovative processes. So that's where we're going with our Digital Transformation Hub. Another of the things that we're looking at, I don't know if I have that on the list here, but as we look at other universities, or other universities look at us, as we're moving to the cloud, they might have specific, and this might affect a lot of you on the phone, they might have specific issues where they might want to move to the cloud but don't know how to get started. Those kinds of issues can be submitted to the Digital Transformation Hub, and we can run through innovation processes to come up with solutions to individual issues as well that universities might be having as far as cloud migration goes. So that's where we are. So the current status with the Digital Transformation Hub is we launched the Digital Transformation Hub on October 19th, so it's pretty darn new. And we're staffing the Digital Transformation Hub now in the roles that we talked about. We're hiring a challenge manager, we're hiring a project manager, and we're hiring a solutions architect. We're also recruiting students and faculty to help us with various challenges that are coming to the Digital Transformation Hub. And we're working through the processes that I talked about here kind of in general to come up with good case studies on how we might work through a lot of these issues. Thank you.
Great. Paul, thank you very much. We do have a number of questions that have come in from the audience. So some of these may be in your domain. Some of them may actually belong to Dustin. I'm just going to roll through them. We've got some time. And again, I want to remind our audience we are recording the webinar, so we will have the archive available. You'll get a follow-up email tomorrow with the slides, with access to the white paper, and go forward. So a couple of questions that have come in. One question, is about security. There have been a number of instances. We all live with the cloud, whether we're aware of it or not, in terms of what goes on in the consumer and the corporate world and also the campus world. There have been some very highly publicized instances of security breaches, the most recent, of course, being Experian, and also a problem with Yahoo. We've got data from the Campus Computing Survey, our annual survey of CIOs, where there's been some change over time, but many have said, well, I can do as well with security on campus as I can from a cloud provider, even as we know that on some campuses, perhaps not any of the campuses in our audience today, that passwords may be on Post-it notes on screen. There may be unlocked back rooms, machine rooms, other kinds of things. So let's take a moment to talk about the security issues and how you've addressed what might be a concern about security, particularly given kind of these large databases that you're aggregating for some of these special projects. Paul, does that go to you? Does that go to Dustin?
Well, let me take a shot at it. And I'm probably not the best person at the university to answer the question since I'm not a security expert. But one of the things that we can talk about a little bit is that using cloud technologies in many cases, it's a shared responsibility model where the cloud provider provides security within their cloud data centers, and the university or any customer for that matter provides the application security on the applications that are running in the cloud. So it is a shared security model, and something that customers need to be aware of is that you're still responsible for the security in your environment. The only thing you're not responsible for is keeping the people out of the data centers and making sure that only the right people can access your data center.
Okay. I want to come back to another question about culture. You talked about training. It seems like the conversation about training for the arrival of the cloud has really two different groups. One is the internal training and the culture at IT, where if you've been in a hosted environment in the past, there might be silos, there might be a sense of ownership, this is mine, in terms of the machines or the people that are involved in terms of servicing these particular projects. And at the same time, there's also sort of, again, the civilian training. We're migrating to the cloud. It's a different way of doing business. For some folks, it'll be invisible, may not seem to be any different than the experience they have on the other side of the screen. And for others, it might be very different. Talk with us a little bit, Dustin and Paul, about those two different groups in terms of the training and cultural issues in that cloud migration process.
Sure. Let me start with the internal side of it. I'll give you a great example. We have a large portion of our team right now. As I mentioned, we're in the process of a 3-year migration. We really kicked off this whole preparatory piece in June, and that whole process has been to evaluate where we are as a campus, but also evaluate where our people are and all of our teams are at. And then identify how can we get them, what do we need to get in place to help the learning. So that includes with kicking off training for our folks. We're having everybody within our IT organization go through a series of trainings, starting with fundamentals on cloud technology, including security training within the cloud space. And now we're starting to dive deeper into more specific training going forward. What I was going to say was, right now, we actually have a large group of our team in a room working on almost doing sort of a hackathon type scenario where they are actually working out and coming up with scenarios to move systems and applications into a cloud within a collaborative team environment. Those types of exercises that allow groups of individuals in what are usually siloed compartments within a university environment to come together and work as a collaborative team to really build the innovation is part of that learning exercise, but also it's part of that team dynamic and growth exercise to move your group into the next phase of the cloud migration. So we're applying really a sort of large-scale change management structure to things based on ensuring that we're doing clear communications with our teams to have them understand where we're going and how we're getting there, having them actually get in and train and work together, and then we're also having some specific groups pulled together to then try to hash out some of the more fundamental pieces. We have a group we call our Cloud Acceleration Team, which is really a group of staff that are working to help develop the tools and resources and figure out potential solutions, and then work with other teams outside in the broader scope of IT to figure out, okay, do these work? Will these choices and decisions and plans for our templates to move forward actually function properly? We also have another team that's focusing on specifically making sure that IT as a whole is up to the challenge and ready to go and is getting the information they need to be successful. On the outside of IT, on the campus-wide piece, it's really all about communication. We've been spending a lot of this initial time, just as you said, getting the behind-the-scenes pieces tweaked and understood. And as we begin the process of really looking to do the migration and rollout, true, if we do this right, things should be relatively seamless to our customers. But we want to make sure that they're on board with an understanding of what's going on. So, for example, when our Center for Teaching and Learning staff actually see the improvements that we're going to be able to develop out of our migration of our learning management system into a more robust cloud-based platform, they're going to be able to know, here's what's happening. We're moving. These are the migration dates. We now moved over. Here's the benefits. Here's how the improvements are going. And being able to quickly understand what they actually gained out of that migration process. So I think communication, understanding, training are all fitting into that package to really make sure that we have a broad-based, successful migration team in place on our campus.
That's great, thanks. A couple more questions that have come in. It sounds from the presentation that Cal Poly is probably a highly centralized IT strategy, in the sense that the Digital Transformation Hub is a centralized resource that is available to the campus. Perhaps people come to you. In some cases, perhaps you go to them. Is that the case? Are you a highly centralized IT structure?
No, actually, we're not a highly centralized. We do have a decent central IT infrastructure in place. I think right now we're at about 125 individuals within our central IT. But like many campuses, we're very decentralized outside of that. So we have pockets of IT resources within each of the colleges, within some of our auxiliary organizations on our campus. So it's really kind of spread out. But involving all those individuals in the process as we move forward is how we're going to make sure that we're successful in our migration. So even if we're in a decentralized model, we need to make sure that we are involving those individuals in the migration, in the conversation, so that we can really make sure that we're going to be able to meet everybody's goals for this change.
And Casey, let me add another point. You brought up the Digital Transformation Hub here as well. As the various different colleges on campus have challenges that they might want to bring to the Digital Transformation Hub, we have a steering committee that we're putting together that represents each of the colleges on campus and several other organizations, so that we'll look at the challenges as they come in to make sure that they fit what the Digital Transformation Hub wants to solve, and will help prioritize how those are processed through the system as well.
And the service model for the hub, Paul, a number of folks are asking, in fact, is that a free service to the various groups that come to you? Or in fact, is there a recharge model, both in terms of the technology infrastructure and the expertise you bring to the problem solving for the groups that you engage with?
So there's a couple answers there, I think. But for the most part, the goal when we're dealing with public sector organizations, and that includes the education side of things, is the challenges are processed through the Digital Transformation Hub. Solution sets are developed, and those solution sets are then put in the public domain, so that other organizations who might be having that same challenge in the public sector can use that solution as well. So we really are putting those out in the public domain, and we are not charging public sector organizations to come up with those solution sets.
That's great. One of the things that many of us hear, and again, the questions that are coming from our audience, one of the things that many of us hear about the cloud is it's going to solve all the problems we historically have experienced with data integration. Lots of data, lots of different data formats from lots of different sources, whether that's looking at information that comes out of our administrative systems about our students, our finances, or some of the very complex research projects that you alluded to, human trafficking, agricultural issues, that it all goes up to the cloud and somehow it's magically stitched together. And yet we know that that's not always going to be the case. Take a few moments to talk about some of the data integration challenges that you've confronted thus far in terms of the work of the Hub.
So because the Digital Transformation Hub, of course, is brand new, we haven't dealt with that kind of problem yet. But one of the things we do plan to do is using cloud technologies and big data analytics. We do intend to be able to use tools like data lakes and that sort of thing to be able to bring data together and tag it so that we can do the analytics on the correct types of data. So we're looking at how to use a lot of those tools to be able to handle big data efforts in a little better way.
I think maybe just to tag on to that, from the application standpoint, it's hard to say that a cloud migration solution is going to solve all of the world's problems necessarily, especially if we're talking about decentralization of data sources coming in. One of the things we are trying, as a university campus, we have lots of inputs of data. It's all over the place. We've got little pockets here and there. We have our central system. We have our data warehouse. But then as new services keep getting added in and new information is collected, how do we pull those together? I think as Paul is mentioning, really looking at expanding and clearly defining a data strategy for the campus becomes just as an important part of this whole process. And to find some success. I think really the reason why is because moving into sort of a data lake type model where we can aggregate all this information to a single source within our cloud infrastructure is going to help us, because what we'll then be able to do is as we get new tools and new services coming in, we can use the functionality that I mentioned all those tools and services and API connections that come out of our cloud infrastructure to simply hand that off to a vendor that we might be working with to say, look, you want to come here on this campus, you want to connect to this information, or we want to be able to use this tool, here's the package, here's the model that you'll use to integrate with our services. I think heading in that direction is what's going to help us to really gain some efficiencies and become more, really have a more forward-thinking approach to our data management rather than trying to modify systems one-off, as a lot of, I think, institutions and organizations have done over the years as new things are added into the mix.
Great. Those are great answers. I want to take a moment to give you for you to talk about the white paper from Cal Poly.
Yeah,
Paul,
sure.
Justin?
Dustin, we'll talk a little bit how this looks. So what we have in the white paper that you all will see is a really detailed, or pretty detailed document on acceleration versus standardization. And Dustin wrote most of this document. I wrote a executive summary for it. Dustin, do you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with it?
Yeah, so really so how I came up with it was, we kind of needed a roadmap for where we were going. The portion of the presentation you heard today is essentially gleaned right from the white paper. So if you want a little bit of light reading, that'll give you a good outline of what we're trying to do, because what we really wanted to try to explain to folks was, what is our approach? How do we see things a little differently than maybe others have done in the past? I think you brought up a couple of comments out there about, there's multiple solutions that are out there in the world. There's multiple approaches to cloud technology. Why are we doing things the way that we're doing it? Why are we maybe not doing a piece here and a piece there type solution, or spreading things out? And why are we doing this all-in model? I think what it really hones down on is that key word of acceleration. Acceleration means acceleration to innovation, acceleration to creativity, acceleration to new ways of thinking. And that's what the white paper outlines, is we are trying to approach this from an all-in model, and again, not specifically tied to any one particular piece. We have an infrastructure partner here, but we also want to look at other resources, other tools that we can plug into that model to help us move forward. I think we're in the 21st century, we're out of the old data center model mentality that we have out there. And we want to be able to expand that. So the paper outlines where we're going with that thought for the future.
Great. I want to thank you both, Dustin DeBrum and Paul Jurasin from Cal Poly. I want to thank our audience as well for joining us today for this conversation about the Cal Poly experience going to the cloud. It's been an interesting and engaging conversation. As a reminder to the audience, there will be a follow-up email tomorrow. You'll get with a link to the presentation, to the archive, to the white paper. That's available, and it will be publicly posted as well. Thank you all for joining us today.